Okay. So I'm gonna talk about, I mean, the exhibition has two works, but I guess I'll give a fast, one of the works is The Lion's Teeth, which is a stop motion animation that I did from 2015 to 2017, 2014 to 2016. There are other parts of the animation that are not in the film that you see, but it started with the collection of 30,000 dandelion seeds, and thinking about botanical colonialism and how the dandelion was brought from Europe and then sort of spread, but then the way that it, then how it's now seen as a plague, and the idea that migrants are also seen as a plague. And one of the definitions of a plague is that a plague is a plant whose virtues, a weed, sorry, migrants is seen as a weed. A weed is a plant whose virtues have not yet been discovered. So this idea that the dandelion stands both for the colonizer and now the return of like migrants being perceived as that. But the animation sort of maps the botanic in kind of botanical anthropomorphizes colonialism through the dandelions taking over both land and the maps, and the body of America represented by a woman, as it's represented in a lot of European engravings, this sort of nymph-like imagery, and then the final part, which is an animation of fruits, which is all of these fruits that were then taken, which is known as the Columbian Exchange. And then the other piece, which was done through in 2017 for the Chicago, the art fair in Chicago. Expo, yeah, sorry. There's so many art fairs. It's a piece, it's a piece from a research I had been doing with Columbus's monuments. It started with an exhibition I did in Italy. Columbus has the most monuments in all the world of historical figure. And while I was working on grad school at the Art Institute, the street that is Columbus Drive would have ended in this monument. So the monument that you see in the drawing in the exhibition, which is Alberto de Palacios rendering for the Columbian Exposition, the largest monument ever built to colonialism. So during Expo, using a coin from the Columbian Exposition, a silver $50, I engrave the design into the wall of the art fair. And the art fair sort of has a history. The World Fair sort of then became the art fairs in a way. There's like a lineage of the World Fairs being sort of the prototype of the Venice Biennial, and then from the Venice Biennial having to have a market for the things that were shown there. So then the Armory was born. So there's like a direct lineage from the World Fair to the art fair. And these are some diagrams of when it was exhibited. This is some renderings when it failed. So of course it wasn't built, but it would have changed the entire sort of landscape of Chicago if it was built. And the walls then were gifted to me by the fair, basically also because the coin was stolen during the installation. So there was a sort of exchange, the walls for the coin that had been stolen. So these are images from what then became the project, where it became a monument. And the monument has three parts. It has the kind of sphere that was going to have a walkway through the entire equator. And then the crowning jewel of the monument was this life-size replica of Columbus's ship, which I found a replica of the ship. And this is like a video. There's a video of this piece where I'm reenacting Columbus's routes with the replica of the ship in my hands as the boat sort of, you can only see my hands. And this is the monument being done. We talked about having different pieces in the exhibition. This was shown at the Chicago Cultural Center, the Chicago Artists Coalition. And it's the replica of the monument, but also taking into consideration sort of this figure of the Atlas and reenacting this posture that are found in like architecture and columns and monuments. And then the monument, this was, I brought this back up because for the exhibition that happened in 1618 North, I said, was it 2 years ago already? Wow, 2 years ago, there was a side event that was done at the Frank Lloyd Wright in Oak Park. And there's a original ticket booth from the Columbian Exposition that was preserved by the owner of the house. It's the Hilsa Caro house. And we did a performance in the with the monument, which the idea of the monument is that collapses and it's like able to be transported by a group of people. So in a way, it's like you can bring it to different locations, sort of talking about colonialism and the way it sort of spread as well with all of its monuments. There's a quote on the, I'm just finding this. There's a quote in the conclusion of The Wretch of the Earth. Fanon writes, "Europe has taken over leadership of the world with fervor, cynicism, and violence. And look how the shadow of its monument spreads and multiplies." The shadow in Fanon's case is singular, but as it is cast upon the world, it spreads and multiplies. This multiplication is an extension into local social-political structures of inequity inherited in and sustained by the post-colony. So just as the shadow falls, it is taken up again and again in this sort of litany that is in the video, in the like multiplication of the monument. And then that sort of became the piece that was at the DePaul Art Museum, which was Go Back to Where You Came From. And this is, I then took the boat of the monument. So it's sort of like a line of a series of works that that all came from the research of the original monument that is drawn in the exhibition. But for 2 months and 9 days, which is the exact time of Columbus's first journey until they touched land, I took the replica of the ship to Europe and sort of traveled with it in my head. This is the printout for the exhibition at the DePaul Art Museum, and these are some photos of me traveling through Europe with the boat in my head, and this jumpsuit that had the how do you call it, the embroidered text and the embroidered ship. So it said, "Go back to where you came from." And this is I started in London in a residency and performance space, and the text is something that I've been told a lot as a migrant since Trump sort of started his, I had been told this before, but it just sort of exacerbated sort of the xenophobia of this administration. So I took the phrase and then took the ship back to the exact location where Columbus is departed in 1492, which is in Puerto de Palos in Huelva. And this is the roots. And I'm not, this is a project I'm working, so that from that project now, I'm working on the 2 tombs of Columbus, which one of them is in Sevilla and the other one is in the Dominican Republic. So I'm just showing how like the kind of, the way that the colonizer lives both in the colonial matrix and in the bodies of the sort of the relics that are spread of this history, which is not over. And one of the things that I was having a conversation with Abram Finkelstein from thinking about the pandemic, but also about the AIDS, the history of AIDS. And he said something like, how do you make work about something that is not over yet? And I think about colonialism as sort of the same way.